The urgency and the positivity, particularly the positivity around the debate, has been missing. It's been very negative. Understandably, it's such a large issue that everyone feels completely.
Behind the polished image of royalty, a revelation has emerged that threatens to rewrite everything the world thought it knew. As Prince William steps forward with a shocking DNA claim, the silence surrounding Meghan Markle is suddenly broken in ways no one expected. What began as a quiet tension now spirals into a moment of reckoning, where truth, legacy, and identity collide under intense scrutiny. So what happens when a single revelation changes the royal narrative forever? Do you think this changes everything for the royal family? Yes or no? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to stay ahead of every shocking twist. A crown, a name, and a gathering storm. The report that set everything in motion did not arrive quietly. It rippled through royal circles with a sense of urgency that was impossible to ignore. At its center stands Meghan Markle, a figure whose journey has never followed a simple script. From Hollywood sets to palace corridors and now a life rooted in California, her story has always carried both glamour and tension. But this time, the stakes feel different, sharper, and far more personal. Whispers suggest a possible future clash between Meghan Markle and Prince William, a conflict shaped not only by personality differences, but by deeper questions of power, legacy, and identity within the modern monarchy. At the center of this tension is the title Duchess of Sussex, a designation that carries more weight than ceremony alone. It reflects both Meghan's connection to the royal institution and her eventual step back from active royal duties, making its potential removal a deeply symbolic issue that could significantly alter her global public image and influence. Concerns around this possibility did not emerge suddenly. In October 2025, a major development unfolded that many observers now view as a turning point. King Charles III made the decisive move to strip Prince Andrew of his remaining royal titles and honors. The action was swift, highly public, and widely interpreted as a clear demonstration that long-standing tradition could be adjusted when circumstances demanded it. Reports suggest that Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William were aligned with this direction, reinforcing a vision of a monarchy that is more streamlined, disciplined, and less tolerant of controversy. For Meghan, this precedent appears to have shifted the landscape entirely. What once seemed unlikely now feels within the realm of possibility. The idea that royal titles can be revoked is no longer theoretical. It has already happened. With Prince William expected to one day ascend the throne, attention naturally turns to how he might choose to shape the institution and whether further changes could follow. In response to this evolving environment, sources suggest Meghan is not remaining passive. Instead, she is reportedly engaging in quiet preparation, consulting legal minds, reviewing constitutional frameworks, and studying historical royal precedents. This approach reflects not only caution but strategy, aimed at understanding her position should any formal challenge arise. Her background as an American-born actress who entered and later stepped back from royal life adds further complexity, placing her between two very different worlds and identities. What makes the situation particularly compelling is the broader context it reflects. It highlights a monarchy in transition, a shifting relationship with tradition, and the enduring significance of titles in defining public identity. At the center of it all stands a possibility that continues to draw attention: that the rules of royal status may still be evolving, and not quietly. The spotlight around Meghan Markle only intensified over time, turning what once looked like a seamless royal entry into a far more complicated journey shaped by pressure, perception, and power. But what truly shifted between her 2018 arrival and the 2020 royal exit? And how did the narrative transform so unexpectedly? A crown, a name, and a battle that refuses to fade. The spotlight surrounding Meghan Markle has grown sharper, not softer, as the years unfold. What once seemed like a smooth transition into royal life has shifted into something far more complex, an ongoing story shaped by pressure, perception, and power. From the moment she stepped into the world of the British royal family in 2018, expectations were immense. But by 2020, when she and Prince Harry stepped back from official duties, the narrative had already begun to change in ways few could have predicted. Now the focus is no longer just on past decisions, but on what may come next. At the heart of the matter lies something both symbolic and deeply personal: her title. To many, it is simply a formal label. Yet behind palace walls and within legal circles, it carries weight tied to history, identity, and influence. Reports suggest that discussions around this issue have quietly intensified, with careful attention being given to constitutional traditions and royal precedent. What makes this moment striking is not just the legal angle being considered, but the broader meaning behind it. For a duchess to even contemplate challenging the structure that granted her status signals a shift in how royal roles are understood in the modern age. It raises questions that stretch beyond one individual. Who defines legacy? And how much control does one truly have over a title once it has been given? Observers point out that this situation reflects a deeper transformation within the monarchy itself. The institution, long seen as unchanging, has faced increasing calls to adapt. Public opinion, especially in places like London and across the United Kingdom, has become more divided, with every development sparking fresh debate. Some view Meghan's stance as bold and necessary, while others see it as a challenge to long-standing tradition. Behind the scenes, her approach appears calculated and determined. Those close to the situation describe a strategy that leaves little to chance, one that considers both legal pathways and the court of public opinion. It is not just about holding on to a title, but about shaping how her story will be remembered years from now. What remains undeniable is her refusal to fade quietly into the background. Whether admired or criticized, Meghan continues to command attention in a way few figures can. As this chapter unfolds, it becomes clear that the outcome may influence more than her personal future. It could redefine how titles, identity, and independence intersect within one of the world's most closely watched families. And so the world continues to watch closely, curiously knowing that whatever happens next will echo far beyond palace gates. The palace was wrapped in an unusual silence until Prince William's quiet command, "Release it," changed everything in an instant. But what was the hidden buildup behind this sudden decision? And why did a single order send shockwaves across the UK and beyond within hours? The moment. The silence spoke. The palace corridors fell into a strange, heavy stillness that morning, the kind that made even seasoned aides uneasy. Phones sat untouched, and the usual early rush of voices faded into nothing. Then, from behind a closed door, Prince William gave a quiet but decisive order: "Release it." In that instant, everything shifted. Within minutes, the statement was public. Within hours, it dominated headlines across the United Kingdom and far beyond, reaching audiences in the United States before the day had even fully begun. What followed was not just reaction, it was division. By nightfall, conversations around the British royal family had hardened into opposing sides, each interpreting the announcement in sharply different ways. Yet the real story was not simply about Meghan Markle. It was about something far more enduring: authority, control, and the survival of an institution under pressure. In the days leading up to that moment, quiet warnings had reportedly circulated within palace walls. A confidential report compiled with care and urgency outlined concerns that had been building over time. Broken protocols, private details slipping into public view, and a growing sense that the royal narrative was no longer firmly in royal hands. For William, this was not just troubling, it was unsustainable. Only a few days earlier, a private discussion had brought together King Charles III, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and William himself. Those familiar with the exchange describe it as tense but controlled. While there were calls for patience, William's response carried a different weight. He reportedly made it clear that emotional ties could not be allowed to weaken the foundation of the crown. Timing, too, revealed intention. The statement emerged just before dawn in London, a calculated move that gave palace officials several crucial hours to shape the narrative before responses could gather force elsewhere. It was precise, deliberate, and unmistakably strategic. Yet beneath the calm delivery lay something deeper. Those who saw William that evening described him as composed to the point of detachment, as though the emotional cost had already been accepted. This was not anger speaking, it was resolved. For Prince Harry, the impact was immediate and deeply personal. The brother who had once stood as a shield now appeared distant, his words firm and unyielding. Some say Harry felt caught off guard. Others believe he sensed what was coming but hoped for a softer outcome. That hope did not materialize. Speculation continues about what finally pushed matters to this point. Whispers of private recordings and revealing messages suggest tensions that ran deeper than the public ever saw. But those closest to the situation offer a simpler explanation: exhaustion. After years of holding the line, the balance shifted. The focus moved from protecting individuals to preserving the institution itself. And in choosing that path, William may have secured control of the narrative, but at a cost that could echo for years to come. A carefully constructed web lay hidden beneath the polished surface of royal life, too precise to be accidental, too quiet to be ignored. But what was this unseen structure truly designed to protect? And why did it emerge in March 2019, just as Meghan Markle was navigating life inside the palace spotlight? The fortune hidden in plain sight. A web so intricate it almost feels intentional, like a puzzle designed to be admired but never solved. Beneath the polished surface of royal life, where appearances are carefully managed, another world quietly took shape. One built not on tradition, but on silence. This was not just wealth. It was a structure, a system, a carefully layered design meant to blur lines and delay discovery. In March 2019, at a time when Meghan Markle was still adjusting to the intense spotlight of palace life, something far less visible came into existence. Far from the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, an offshore account was quietly established in Jersey, a location long associated with financial discretion. But this was no simple account set up for convenience. It was something far more deliberate, more complex, and far harder to trace. What made it remarkable was not just its existence, but how deeply it was buried beneath layers of global connections. Ownership did not point to a single name. Instead, it moved like a shadow across borders. A company registered in the British Virgin Islands held stakes in another entity based in Delaware, while oversight seemed to pass quietly through a structured trust in Switzerland. Each piece of this chain served a purpose, not to reveal but to obscure. To the untrained eye, it would appear as nothing more than routine corporate layering. But to those familiar with high-level financial strategy, the pattern was unmistakable. This was what experts often describe as distance by design, where each added layer creates just enough separation to make certainty difficult. It wasn't about hiding in darkness, but about existing in a space too complicated to easily understand. As whispers began to circulate, attention quietly shifted behind palace doors. Investigators, supported by legal authority and financial specialists, began the slow and methodical task of tracing connections. Each document uncovered, each transaction reviewed, added another piece to the puzzle. What once seemed scattered started forming a clearer image, one that pointed, step by careful step, toward a single central figure. The deeper they looked, the more evident it became that this was not an accidental arrangement. It carried the signature of experienced hands, professionals who understood the fine details of international finance, who knew exactly how to construct systems that could withstand scrutiny, or at least delay it long enough to matter. And yet, what made this story so compelling was not just the complexity of the system, but the contrast it created. Publicly, everything appeared structured, transparent, even predictable. Privately, however, there existed a parallel reality, one defined by calculated distance and quiet control. In the end, the question was never just about money. It was about intention. Because in a world where every move is watched, the most powerful actions are often the ones no one sees coming. A $499 payment buried in a routine audit suddenly shifted everything, pulling investigators toward RQL LLC and a secretive U.S. medical facility. But why would such a small sum trigger serious concern? And what deeper meaning lies behind a possible hidden agreement no one was meant to uncover? The payment, the trust, and the silence between them. The financial detail that quietly surfaced would soon eclipse everything else. During what should have been a routine audit, investigators paused over a modest entry, just $499, sent from an entity labeled RQL LLC to a private medical facility in the United States known more for secrecy than publicity. On paper, it looked insignificant. Inside the commission, it became the question nobody could ignore. At first, the focus was narrow. Who was behind RQL LLC, and why that specific clinic? But the tone shifted when whispers of a non-disclosure agreement appeared tied to the same transaction. That single detail widened the lens. By early 2024, what began as a financial check had expanded into something far more complex. Travel records were revisited, security footage re-examined, and older transactions pulled back into view. Individually, each element seemed harmless. Together, they hinted at a pattern that refused to settle into a simple explanation. While investigators followed the money, another layer of the story quietly rose to the surface, one tied not to numbers, but to legacy. The Sussex children, formerly recorded with royal titles on official documents, had now become part of a broader institutional review. What once felt ceremonial was now being studied with unusual care, as though every detail carried weight beyond tradition. At the center of this emotional shift stood the memory of Princess Diana. Her estate, carefully arranged decades earlier, had always been intended to pass through her sons and eventually to their children. Valued at over £22 million, the trust was never just about wealth. It was a bridge between past and future. But as the Commission's work deepened, that bridge was placed under quiet scrutiny. In a move that sent ripples through private circles, Prince William reportedly stepped in. Discussions were held behind closed doors, and a temporary pause was placed on any allocations connected to the Sussex children. Officially, it was described as procedural, nothing final, nothing permanent. Yet the message was unmistakable. Caution had replaced assumption. For Prince Harry, the impact was deeply personal. This was not about policy or protocol. The trust represented his mother, her intentions, and a connection that could never be recreated. To see it suspended, even briefly, felt less like administration and more like something slipping out of reach. Those close to him described a reaction that moved beyond anger into something quieter, heavier, grief layered with disbelief. And still, the investigation pressed on. Financial threads continued to tighten, and unanswered questions lingered in the background. Then, on a gray London morning, attention shifted once more. A private jet, a secured military airfield, and the brief, almost cinematic image of two small figures at the top of a staircase. It was a moment that seemed simple on the surface, yet carried the weight of everything that had come before it. Because by then, the silence inside the palace had already changed, and nothing about what followed would feel ordinary again. A brief call between Prince William and Prince Harry lasted less than 15 minutes, yet its silence spoke louder than words ever could. What was really left unsaid between the brothers, and how did years of distance turn a simple conversation into something so heavy, complex, and impossible to ignore? the silence between them. A single call, short enough to measure in minutes, yet heavy enough to echo across years, revealed more than either brother intended. Less than 15 minutes passed, and still, almost nothing was truly said. Every word was weighed, every pause deliberate. Between Prince William and Prince Harry, the silence carried more meaning than conversation ever could. This was never a story of simple distance. It was something far more complicated. Two people who still cared, yet could no longer reach each other through the layers that had built up over time. Those who once saw them side by side in Kensington Palace during the early 2000s remember a bond that seemed unshakable, strengthened by shared loss and public scrutiny after the events of 1997. That memory still lingers, but now it feels like something locked away rather than lost. What makes their divide so striking is not anger, but restraint. Both men now move carefully, aware that even private exchanges rarely remain private. The call reflected that reality, controlled, guarded, almost rehearsed. It was not an argument, nor was it reconciliation. It was something quieter, and perhaps more final. Acknowledgement of distance. At the same time, behind palace walls, another narrative was taking shape. A speech, quietly drafted, carried a tone very different from the emotional headlines that often surround the royal family. It was said to focus on continuity, on the idea that the institution must stand steady regardless of personal conflict. Those who had seen early versions described it as calm but unwavering, a rare balance in modern royal messaging. The message itself was simple yet powerful: duty before comfort. In one line, Prince William was expected to make clear that protecting the integrity of the monarchy mattered more than avoiding criticism. It was not framed as an attack, but as a boundary, one that could not easily be crossed again. While this was unfolding, a formal review was quietly progressing in the background. The palace, rooted in centuries of tradition, maintained its familiar composure. No public reaction, no visible tension, just a stillness that suggested control rather than calm. By early 2024, that stillness had become its own kind of statement. And yet, just when everything seemed locked into place, the distance, the silence, the carefully chosen words, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to change how the entire situation would be seen. Because in the end, the real story is not about what was said or written. It is about what remains unsaid. Two brothers, bound by history, separated by circumstance, and standing on opposite sides of something neither of them ever expected to face. Before dawn fully broke over London, a quiet signal emerged online. One flight path pointing not to a busy airport, but RAF Northolt, reserved for discreet, high-level movements. What prompted this unusual choice, and what hidden development required such secrecy before the world even woke up? The arrival that changed everything. Before sunrise could fully touch London, a quiet but powerful signal had already begun to spread online. A flight record, simple on the surface, hinted at something far more serious beneath. The jet was scheduled not for the usual busy terminals, but for RAF Northolt, a place reserved for moments requiring silence, control, and importance. That single decision spoke louder than any official statement. On the manifest, one name stood out: Prince Harry, traveling with two young dependents, Archie Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor. It had been since the Platinum Jubilee in 2022 that they were last seen on British soil. Now, without warning, that long silence was ending. Yet one absence was impossible to ignore. Meghan Markle was not listed. That detail alone sent questions racing faster than facts. Waiting near the runway were figures whose presence removed any doubt about the seriousness of the moment. Sir Clive Alderton and Dr. Michael Dixon stood ready, representing not just protocol, but urgency. This was not a family visit arranged on impulse. It had been planned carefully, quietly, and at the highest level. When the aircraft door finally opened, the atmosphere shifted. Prince Harry stepped out, his expression heavy, shaped by months of pressure that no headline could fully explain. There was no wave, no acknowledgement of the distant cameras. Instead, there was a pause, brief but filled with meaning. Then came the moment that changed everything. He turned back. At the top of the steps, two small figures appeared. Archie Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor were no longer distant names or carefully managed glimpses. They were present, real, stepping into the open air, each holding their father's hand as they made their way down slowly. It was a simple image, yet it carried a weight no document or legal argument could match. Beyond courtrooms, beyond reports, beyond whatever positions might be taken by Prince William or responses issued behind palace walls, this was something entirely different. It was personal, because at the heart of it all stood a meeting that no institution could fully define. Two children arriving to see their grandfather, King Charles III. In that quiet, carefully managed space, the story shifted. What had once been shaped by distance, statements, and speculation became something immediate and human. And from that moment forward, nothing about the situation would feel quite the same again. Two outcomes lay before a decision that could not be reversed, as Buckingham Palace entered the final stage of a rare royal review, stretching back to 2024. But what exactly was contained in the Commission's conclusions, and why were only Prince William, Princess Anne, and the Lord High Chancellor trusted to decide what comes next for a fractured royal future? The decision that could redefine the crown. Two outcomes stood quietly on the table, and between them lingered a question no report could truly settle. Behind the guarded doors of Buckingham Palace, a rare process had reached its final stage. The Royal Commission for Lineal Ethics and Continuity, after months of review stretching back to early 2024, had placed its conclusions into the hands of just three figures: Prince William, Princess Anne, and the Lord High Chancellor. What they decided would not simply close a file, it would shape the future of a family already divided by distance and history. Far from London, in the quieter rhythms of California, the lives of Archie and Lilibet had unfolded largely outside the royal system. Yet their place within it had never truly been settled. At the heart of the matter lay more than titles or protocol. It was about recognition, belonging, and the fragile thread connecting generations, especially the legacy of Princess Diana, whose influence still moved silently through every corner of this story. If the ruling leaned toward full recognition, it would signal something rare, a willingness by the monarchy to bend without breaking. It would suggest that tradition could evolve, not as a surrender, but as a form of strength. Such a decision might reopen doors long thought sealed, softening the distance between Prince Harry and the institution he left behind. It could also release the long-discussed trust connected to Diana, allowing her legacy to reach the grandchildren she never met, transforming what had been held back into something shared. But the alternative carried a different weight. A decision against recognition would not simply maintain the current divide, it would formalize it. The separation between California and London, already stretched thin since 2020, would become something official and enduring. Titles could fade into uncertainty, and the quiet hope of reconciliation would grow even more distant. For two brothers once bound by shared experience, the gap might widen beyond repair. Outside the palace gates, the atmosphere was electric. Cameras remained fixed, reporters stood ready, and headlines waited for a single signal. Yet beneath the anticipation lay something deeper than public curiosity. This was not just a royal update, it was a reflection of what the monarchy chooses to be in a changing world. Because in the end, no document, no matter how detailed, could answer the question pressing hardest against the moment. Not a DNA test, not a formal review, not even the careful judgment of those entrusted with the decision. The real uncertainty was far more human. In a family watched by millions, shaped by duty and personal choice, can an institution designed to hold everything together still do so when the distance between its members has grown this wide? Or has that distance, measured not just in miles but in belief, already redrawn the limits of what unity can mean? So, what do you think happens if Prince William drops a shocking DNA claim that leaves Meghan Markle stunned? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.